All right. So yeah, the get me running again. What did
All
you
right.
say?
So my initial statement, we had for the purpose of recording, we had a short dialogue where I didn't state my intent, or I didn't state my intent clearly, where I specified how people are comparatively to the seeds in the Bible when they get excited about new information, new things, spiritual rebirth, things like that. And Tom understood that, so we didn't really go deep into it. But the point is, I see that a lot, and I usually treat new excitement, new energies, spiritual rebirths kind of like that, because I myself feel like I could do that every day if I wanted to. If I wanted to get excited and feel reborn every single day, I could do that. And because I feel like I could do that, when other people do that, I'm like, that's great. And I can be with them on it. But it's like, I'm going to see where this goes, because this point does not define a lot for me. Like the point that they are
in
at
the end
that
zone
moment.
before.
Because I live in the end zone, it feels like.
Yeah. Or
I
sometimes
could.
your end zone is their 1 yard line. And their 1 yard line is your end zone. That's sometimes how that works.
Or both, from the perspective that we choose. And
Yeah.
not everybody can choose that perspective, but we can.
If you can recognize the direction, that's often, is someone trending, does someone trend towards, or does someone trend away? And you can apply that concept is stated very broadly because it can be applied very broadly. But you have to be consistent and you have to be accurate. So you have to know, using the information from the other episodes, how to measure a thing without bias. And I've spent about combined total 6 hours on how to set up the equation, and another 6 hours on what fallacies and biases can do to that. So you have 12 hours of construction on how to make your measurements squeaky clean. Number one. Number two, what to measure.
So it's unable to detect my camera. Oh, hey, I wonder if I could camera from my phone without switching the computer.
So that was the first part. And then where did I go? I got kicked out of my concentration.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's gonna happen.
I need to mute.
Okay, leave me alone with my thoughts. Tony was talking about
seeds, people, excitement, spiritual births. Every year I'm an adult.
Yes. So was talking about how to see that excitement and just kind of feed off of it. And well, it's a thing where if you can see where that person is coming from, and you can see where that person is, and you can measure them because you know how to measure now. At least close enough is close enough for many of these things, because people will correct you as you get close enough. So you learn how to see where they are and where they're coming from. There's a very useful thing is if you can see where they're going or where they're trying to go or what direction they're headed, if they have never been there before. If your measurement is good enough and you have traveled to them, you can know where they are going to end up because you have the information they're trying to get from you. They just don't know how yet. And it's the same is true for you if you want to go back further than what they understand. So there's only one way for you two to meet, and that is for the two of you to meet. There's no other way. But if you have the steps that connect the entire line and the other person doesn't, if you can reverse engineer your trip and do each step in a backwards order sequentially, then you will know their next step every step of the way, and you can walk it slowly. So that is what is one presentation of today's topic, which is cognitive quantum entanglement, which I love this topic because this is the science of connection. All right, this is what everybody wants. This is what everybody wants. Period. It's what we're built to want, because we're built to become powerful. That's evolution. We're built to survive. We're built to become better versions of ourselves. And nothing trumps the power of coordinated cooperation. Because if you are you and you are 100% capable, listen, so again, it depends where you
Dare
measure
you
yourself. How dare
say
I?
such an absolute?
So because here's why, because I can, and here's the same thing, which is also an absolute. 2 is greater than 1, which is an absolute, mind you. So if you have one copy of Tom Brisby, who is capable, intelligent, bold, and daring, and whatever cool adjectives you want to put in there to make me sound increasingly mythical. No matter how powerful you make me, Tom, the individual, I would lose to a copy of myself working with a second copy of myself when both of them decide that both of their abilities will be used in conjunction with each other with perfect cooperation and trust. So when the goal becomes to become more of yourself,
But that
even by using
extra,
another as an extension, that
but that
trust,
extra makes a big difference at the end there. That
it does.
with unlimited trust and cooperation and things like that, a lot of people can't marry themselves. I'm one of those people.
So
I can't marry myself.
So here's how you build it.
But I don't want to be able to,
Well, then
because
you
the way
get
I
rid
work
of
with
this
people is
episode,
better that
because
way.
I'm gonna spill all the beans, man. This is gonna tell you how to build it in any direction with mathematical precision. And it's so simple it could fit on a kindergartner's grade sheet, which I find wonderful, because most of the people who need this the most have the most emotional integrity of a kindergartner. They want to fight you, that you're better than me. They want to be scared of you. They want to backbite. They want to be paranoid. Just these vengeful little humans, most of us, in the right circumstance, by the way. I'm going to repeat that. Most of us in the right circumstances are vengeful little humans. We're not completely vengeful little humans. Only parts of us are, and they're only powerful for very specific moments in time. And we get to notice what those specific moments in time are if we're paying attention. And we can decide if those specific moments in time are ones that we let go or ones that we find a more creative outlet, which scratches the same itch that is not being met, but is so sorely needed at that moment that is our only option for reply, because that is the tool for the job, whether we want it to be or not. So, having said all of that, let's talk about cognitive quantum entanglement. So before we do all that, this is a physics concept. Cognitive physics. I'm stealing a field to give my own science structure. It's a good field. I have a degree in it. If you can handle the math, I recommend it. It makes understanding consciousness a lot easier if you can understand the math that goes behind this. There's 2 reasons. One is it's complicated. So even if it's not directly applicable, it teaches you how to handle things that are as complicated as some of the ideas that make understanding consciousness necessary to do certain things. If you need a 4th dimensional idea to do a 4th dimensional trick to get around a 3-dimensional problem, which is your top 1%, by the way. That's exactly what happens. If you need that, well then, being able to do that is a requirement. You have to be able to conceive of a 4th dimensional idea. You need to know what it looks like to build one that doesn't fall apart, which means knowing how to test it, which means if you are an either or person instead of a yes and person, all of your little machines are going to fall apart because they're too simple. And after a while, well, sure, you try a thing and it doesn't work. But after a while, it's not the thing that is too complicated. Sometimes it's the person who is too simple. And that's good, because things don't get easier, but people can choose to become more complex. And the only way to achieve complexity is to explore answers besides the ones you already know. Try them. Fuck around and find out. Use wisdom to pick good tests for yourself. Things where if you fail, you won't destroy yourself, but you will feel challenged. You pick what they are. Believe me, the places that you should look first are the places where you feel the most miserable, because that's where you need it the most. You have a need for a tool set that is where you are. It is not being met and it's making you feel like crap. Find out what tools you're missing. Look at the people who are happy. Ask them what's different. All safe. And who doesn't look at the office clown, as a little bright part of their day? Well, the grumpiest people, for one, but even then, a really good clown knows how to get through to them too. It's not that the clowning around is the problem. It's the clowning around needs to be adjusted to their level of clown, which means you need to be able to measure it accurately. So if normal people like normal jokes and you're a pretty good clown, you're going to be good at that. But if this person is a standard deviation away from normal in terms of how grumpy they are, you need to be able to tone your joke down by that same amount. And then it will be on the wavelength that is slightly above that person's natural state, but not so far gone that it becomes offensive. That's comedy explained with math. It's a positive amplitude adjustment by comparison that does not exceed a threshold of decoherence. That's how to make somebody laugh. That sounds like a hoot, but guess what? I can tell a joke because of it. I'm damn funny. I know it. I use it. Many times a tough situation is immediately diffused by a series of good jokes. They're like little jabs of reality. Try it. Try to be mad at someone while you're laughing. I dare you. If you can figure out how to do it, actually call me because I want you to teach me. That sounds incredible. But for now, we're going to move on and talk about quantum entanglement. So first, we're going to do the physics of it, and it's going to be a very, very brief overview. I got some pictures here. Let's see, where are we going to start? Let's start over here. This one. So this is an artist's rendition of how we understand quantum entanglement right now. That's a jumbled mess. But that's like what it really looks like. So we're going to zoom out to a simpler, less complicated model. Go ahead, Tony. You got your hand raised. I see ya. Tony's got his hand up. But he's muted. That's ironic. He's interrupted me with silence. How dare you?
It's a in-between bridging the topic gap type question. And the question is, you recommended everybody study the math of quantum entanglement or quantum physics. Yeah, everybody study the math of quantum physics. I get all that. My question is purely vibrational.
Yes. Oh, how do you do it without the math?
No. The question is purely vibrational.
Okay, I do have
And
that
the
answer.
question is, your classes, how did you function in them or with the math? Did you learn how you worked, or did you have to learn it like everyone else and then apply it?
So what I would do, the best way that I could describe what I was doing was I was self-reflecting without realizing that's what I was doing. I had virtually no amplitude to my own ego. And that made it next to invisible. So whoever I landed on or latched on, I would become this sort of perfect carbon copy of their ego. But that was because I was like a litmus paper, because my own was so suppressed. So what I would do is I would interact with this, and I would be like, wouldn't understand any of that, but I would say, hey, if I do this thing, what happens? And these things were very specific because I could make them very specific. What are 10 different ways I could say hello to somebody? And what different reactions do I get? And which versions of hello get the best reactions over a span of people? So that day, I would go out and I would say, my normal people that I say hello to every day is like maybe 10 or 20 or 30, depending, because I've work in a plant that has a lot of people, and I'll test one of these things out, and I'll put a bunch of variations on it. Sometimes I'll tell a joke, sometimes I'll be like sincere, sometimes I'll be more excited, enthusiastic. But the point is, and that's something I did a lot more before I understood emotions, right? This was my real life. I need to figure this out test. So it wasn't like a game for me. Some people hear this and they say, why would you do that? Doesn't that sound manipulative? It's like, no, it's the opposite of manipulation. It is, I am 100% manipulated by my surroundings at all times, and I don't understand why. And it is a very scared experience. And it is, I need to figure out something, because if it doesn't, I'm going to die miserable and anxious and alone, because I'll alienate every person who tries to care about me because they feel tragically connected somehow. But after a while, people realize either you're too far gone for them to help, or you were long gone before they ever met you, and they say, well, best of luck to you, better you than me, because if I stick around, I'm coming along too. And that's not going to happen. So that's kind of how I describe it. Is it was a very life and death scientific approach. So I was deathly afraid of the consequences, and so I was very careful, but I was also so scared to act in any meaningful way that most of my actions were invisible, observational, calculating, very tiny, like moving by degrees and inches to figure out. There are ways to move your body to convey meaning. And there are many different ways to try and say the same thing. But there are only a handful of very specific rules about body language in general, that if you understand those at a basic concept, no amount of observation or understanding can replace the breadth of that knowledge. It's literally a higher perspective, to where you see the full map of the boundary that was invisible to you before, and it just fills in instantly. Oh, that is what makes all of those things the same. Oh, that is what causes the slight differences. Done. Here's how that evolves over time. Here's how it changes based on which direction I'm going through it. Here's how you connect these two things. That's everything you can do with a fully bounded idea. We covered that. So that's the science of connection. So if you think about amplitude and scale, the experiments I was doing actually are a very apt metaphor for quantum entanglement, because the interactions are very small. It's easy to see interactions between big personalities. But can you look at a big personality and see 80 small personalities functioning together with varying strengths and weaknesses concurrently all at the same time? Can you see how well a person has those different states of potential organized, and how often they choose specifically the wrong tool to avoid confronting their lack of ability in the exact right tool for the job? If you can answer yes to all of those other questions, you understand measurement the way that I'm going to explain it, the way that I came to understand it and figured out how to map for everyone as well. So can you see the slices as they dance with each other? Or can you only see the parts you know? And how do you know when there's a missing dance partner? How do you fill them in? And then they update the whole picture, and you can find more, see more, do more, explain more, coordinate better, become more efficient, better tools for more jobs. That's all it is. That is efficiency. Arranging the most efficient sequence of tools pointing towards a singular job. That's capitalism. You can do that better than anyone. That's how you win. So, quantum entanglement. Let's talk about what this is from a physics perspective. So, that was one picture, that really complicated one. That's what scientists think it kind of looks like if you could zoom in super speed, and it would be all zipping around and hazy and all kind of crazy. But this is more the movie magic version that a lot of people have come to understand. So it's two particles that are different, but they are, let's see, where is it? I have another one. This one here is an actual picture of quantum entanglement that we've observed. So that's a real picture over there. And there's the science data from it that proves that those two particles were entangled. So this can happen very close to one another, almost touching. But the crazy thing is it can also happen when they're very far apart as well. Which means that there is a connection that transcends the speed of light when it comes to the exchange of information. And I have a theory for what that is. And I wish Duncan was here because this is my own theory. And this is a recent theory of mine. I think that string theory is correct, but not the way that they say it in the textbooks. I literally mean string theory. So everyone is so keen to explain the universe as a single string. But what if it's a lot of small strings working together instead, very much like a neural net, very much like our own brain cells, very much like a lot of different things. It isn't one big thing that ever does it. It's always the coordination of very many things that are small. So now imagine you have little tiny strings that are things. These are the things. They're connected with strings. They're never apart from one another. However, the way that we see them, it only looks like they're alone most of the time. So what that tells me is that these threads are connected. And when you pull a string and you move it, it moves at the same speed regardless, because all of it has to move at the same time because it is one object. Even though it is very tiny and sometimes very long, it is one object with no slack. So it moves as one. But the end is here and we can see it. The other end is way over here. So it looks to us like a teleportation. We're just seeing the full length of that string. And we're measuring the two endpoints at the same time.
Why strings opposed to dimensional theories?
String is a dimension. String is a one-dimensional object. No, string is a two-dimensional object.
I was going to ask, two is a line, right? You
Yeah, it's the simplest form of data transfer that is continuous.
And string theory says that it basically boils the universe down to that, or saying you can look at it.
It's all, they say it's all the same string. It's just how do you unravel it.
So string theory is the simplification of the universe to two dimensions, in a sense.
Yes.
And your concept is
there's
more
a specific reason for that, and that is because 2 dimensions is the smallest number of dimensions that information can be transferred in. Because you can make an amplitude wave, a specific wavelength, frequency, phase on a specific string. That's exactly what strings do. They vibrate.
Yeah, we covered it in one of the lectures.
Information happens, and so when these things touch and collide with each other, they make vibrations off of each other. So, and what I'm saying is that in this universe, there are many copies of the same kind of string. and many different ways and lengths and different, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why black holes are so interesting. Black holes are the knots. But because these strings don't tie like knots, they can just collect together. That is where you can find any length of string that you want in any amplitude, phase, or tone. That is a black hole. Infinite potential. Every potential. It fits in this little box. If you can figure out how to get your piece of string without getting pulled in as well. Because you are the other part of everything that is in there. There is a specific counterpart for every string inside you over that threshold, which means you are this close to being flattened as a wave potential or amplified to double, depending on how lucky your phase transition rolls. Anyways, so that's my theory on why that's true. That's not proven physics yet, but it doesn't have to be for me to learn something from it. So that was a fun thought experiment that may or may not have physical relevance, but it has metaphorical relevance when you apply that idea to people. Now, you can say that there are certain strings of people that resonate at certain frequencies. Carl Jung mapped this extensively. He called them archetypes. That's a very good map. It's a very good map. It covers most of the ground, really. Just you have to map it like we talked about in our shadow episode and our episode where we talked about the concepts of good and evil. You can't map them one-sidedly. You have to look at the good in the tyrant to understand the tyrant. You have to look at the evil in the wise king to understand the wise king. You can't keep the labels where they are if you are to understand the different strings of people. How do they find themselves good? How do they find themselves bad? You know, they collect. And that's because we have a limited number of ways of perceiving information as human beings. We're very specific instruments. We're very complicated instruments, and there's a lot of us, which means that our very specific bodies must produce a very specific perspective that is bound by limits, because that is the limit of specific perspective, is you lack scope, which means that what we are currently mapping right now as human beings with ideas like the archetypes and higher dimensional consciousness and cognitive quantum entanglement is we are mapping our own ability to understand ourselves. And that's done in stages. Because like I said, once you fully map the boundaries of something and understand the equation, you fill in everything. Then it becomes stable and you can build on it, like DNA. That's like exactly what the double helix DNA does with your gene coding. Your GNA coding. Why not? Let's just throw letters and numbers around. This is already a scientific abortion as it is. But the point
I like
is,
new words.
you get the gene sequencing in the proper order using this exact mechanism. So this is a process that is fundamentally compatible with the complexity of life. Think about that. It is literally how life is built. It's the blueprint, and that is the structure it has. Don't ignore something that powerful. Steal its technology. Make it your own. Find the right metaphor. That's my advice. And I think this is a damn good metaphor coming up. So we've talked about what quantum entanglement is. So the next thing I want to talk about is connection with people. And I'm going to start with a definition of what I mean. So this is a measurement. A connection is a measurement. For this example, everything's going to be in terms of measurements because then we can use things after we measure them because we know what they are. So this is how that works. So we are going to talk about connections in terms of the mind, what was it? The brain wave-like example of a person that we did in one of the previous lectures, where every person is a specific wavelength that has frequency, amplitude, phase, etc. And somehow this wave function is a perfect representation of all the full dimensionality that is you within one set boundary, and then you can understand yourself, how that goes. So that is you. And what I'm saying is that when two people who are these things pass each other or interact with each other, they follow the laws of wave addition using the Schrodinger equations, which means, and we've seen this, you can test it with a slinky. It's so simple. You can prove it with a slinky, that if two waves match up, they'll be perfectly, normal in their direction and perfectly normal in the direction. They'll have these crazy, funky interactions in the middle, like while it's live. And then when they leave, they're back to their normal selves. That's how wave addition works. Like in the physical world, and we've tested that, like I said, the slinky test confirms it. You can prove it on the playground at kindergarten level. So when this happens to people, that is where the connection is found. How are each of you different because you're with that other person? How much of that are you aware of? And how much of that are you attracted to? And how much of that are you curious about? And how much of that are you afraid of? And how much of that are you offended by? And what does this sound like? Now, if you remember the list on communicating with the shadow, anything you have a reaction to has the power to make you stronger if you can figure out the pattern behind it. That's a different way of understanding the survival mechanism. At its core, that's what it does. That is how you survive. You do that. So this is the way to kind of explain that. And whoever understands more learns how to be more in any direction that they do understand. And that is how you grow from certain people. That's the difference between lifting up and being lifted up. I'll tell you the difference, and I'll tell you why all the best people are teachers. It's because they're the most selfish. I'm going to take a drink before I explain what that means. But it's true. It's 100% true. Best teachers are very selfish people. All right, so why would I say that? Well, it's because it's a survival mechanism, and I understand how that feels enough to recognize it when it's going on. Lifting somebody up, that lets another person experience something they cannot. That's a gift to them. And the price is work, because they can't do it. So you have to do it. So what do they get out of it? If they're wise, they pay attention to the experience and gain wisdom from their new perspective for as long as they're able to hold it without your help. And maybe over time, if they care about that, it's a place they can learn to reach on their own. Well, that's what the teacher tells himself, but how many students do their homework, really? You got a couple overachievers in the front row and a bunch of C and B students who don't want mom and dad to get upset. And you've got your collection of dope smoking, neo-Nazi, hate smearing, delinquent whatevers in the back who just wish the teacher would die of a heart attack so they could go home early. So it's the same thing when it comes to all of this in terms of what people can know. How good of a student are you? Man, that's a question that never gets asked, because the one that should be asked is, what does it mean to be a good student? And most people think being a good student is being able to remember things that you were told. A big deal. I can remember what I'm told. Anybody can. You learn that from your parents. When they tell you no, yes, it's a child mentality. But learning how to find an answer when nobody has it, and how to be right, because you learn how to get out of your own way when it comes to making bad measurements, bad decisions, bad judgment calls that are really emotional decisions wrapped up in some thing or another that you can't understand. It's got you tied up. That's how all that works. So when we have this state of mind, whatever it may be, we become that waveform, which means there exists a waveform capable of being produced by another human who is not you, that is a complementary factor to exactly whatever you're feeling right now. Why can I say that? Because there's so damn many of us. That's why. It's mathematical probability that you'll find your soulmate is probably more common than you think. The number of people who could fill that role is not one. If you find one of them, it's not every day either, okay? So it's not like valueless. But if you lose one, you know, you can try again, and with enough tries, you'll have a relatively good chance of success if you're measuring yourself and what you're looking for honestly and what that means. You will know who that person is. Finding them will be easy if you're able to understand how, even though you are a creature of free will, you are entangled by your body's limitations, and you are entangled by the people who will resonate with you because they will find you, because they have to, because you are on the same strand and the same spot at opposite ends. Mr. 8, and I'll explain what these numbers mean later. Mr. 8 in compassion will find Mr. 2 in anger, and they will become friends. Because Mr. 8 can put up with Mr. 2's anger. And Mr. 8's anger isn't so much to drive this other person away. They will find each other. And one of two things will happen. They will attract or they will repel. And knowing the difference is what that's the transition. So this is the quantum vision, right? This is the quantum mechanical connection, all right? So this is the quantum mechanical realm using quantum mechanical rules. So when you get close enough to each other, perspective changes to Newtonian mechanics, and all of the examples I've used to explain social algorithms and empathy and fear and all of these different very easily explainable and relatable using classical physics examples. So what I'm noting here is a shift in dimensional perspective. You're leaving the two-dimensional realm at that point and reaching the third dimension from perspective. That's what I'm saying. So just if one is mapping the changing units, the way I do this math, that is a change in units. So you can't mix the math. So the math for this section is only for this section. It does not apply to anything else I've said. It's the source of everything. These are like the symbols for pi and the other constants of the universe, where if you plug this in, it does the same thing every time with the same, yes. But the math for this is easier. So that's why I want to make sure it's That's all it is. Don't say Tom said this thing applies to fourth dimensional ideas. No, that's wrong. Start now. At the end of this lecture, stop. That's the good zone for using this. So what is this? Well, without further ado, I'm going to talk about this little wave function that I've made from various online resources. And so this is the human emotional wave spectrum. And actually, I'm going to share my screen for that because that little camera is not doing that justice. And I actually want to go into some depth with that one. So screen share. That one. Oh no, I can share the app. There we go.
My camera's not on.
All right. So yeah, if you were an impatient person, this
makes me happy to see.
This little map here.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd come back to it. Me and you toss around a whole lot of ideas. This was one that stood out as potentially something that I could really enjoy exploring with you. But you posted it so vaguely, all I could do was agree with it, but I couldn't really motivate it. I needed more of your energy for it, or need more of your energy for it.
No, I understand. I got you. You need to love it as much as I do before you can use it like you love it.
Oh, don't be dramatic about it. It's
I'm
not
being sincere. I don't think that I can do anything. Look, nothing that you don't love will succeed. I believe that at my core.
False. You just gotta make it
love is a
fun.
spectrum. Love is a spectrum. It's not 0 or 1, brother. It's you can love something just a
You
tiny little
said
bit.
as much as you do. Your exact words were, "I need to love it as much as you do."
Well,
That's what I said. Don't be dramatic.
Yeah, but you always copy whatever the strongest resonance is in the room. So when you understand it as much as I do, I'll know you have it the way that I do. That's a byproduct, not the. It's not the cause and effects. Yeah, that's a confirmation of my measurement.
Saying I copy the strongest resonance in the room implies that
You read and match the vibe.
I what?
You read and match the vibe. And if the vibe doesn't change, you change to it.
But remember, I believe people are crystals, and it's situational.
Yeah, so
that's a good default.
I'm a resonance board for you because I'm always constant ego energy. So always 100%.
No, you're not.
Really? Maybe that's just on the inside. You'll feel it if you're in the room with me.
I'll look for it. I'll look for it and point it out.
Man, I got that big dick energy just flowing.
Well, I mean, the way you view things in the spectrum that you do.
I lost Nancy. Nancy, I'm sorry. Forgive me.
She'll be back. But the way you view things, and I'm gonna go ahead and jump out on a limb since you're jumping out on limbs. I'm gonna say the way you feel things. I'm not even gonna use my word vibe. The way you feel things, I think it's equal to my consciousness and control. So when we read each other without specified intentions, the reading may not be the reading from the perspective of the person that we're trying to read.
Yeah, that's well said.
It clicked right at the end. Like it came together for me.
Nancy, you picked a good time to drop out. Good time to jump back in.
She did not pick a good time to drop out. She should have stayed.
So if I'm understanding,
I believe people are crystals. I believe in control. I believe me and you are different than most. I've separated that on Monday distinctly and explained why. With us, when we read each other without clearly stated intention, I believe the readings are likely to be not from.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you. You're very good at getting my mind back on track. Very nice. The best way that I can explain what it means for me to have a feeling, and I can explain it, is, have you ever seen an autistic person who was autistic to the point that they were physically and mentally crippled and disabled? Like they're just having a full-on tantrum to the point where their own skull is offensive and they are hitting themselves with full, physical trauma. Have you ever seen that kind of intensity in a person?
I've worked with kids for 16 years.
So you've seen that. So
I've seen that in kids that didn't speak English. I've worked with kids from other countries. I get that.
So good. So that's the intensity. But what I have is this fear of my own power. That means unless I understand the emotion perfectly, I'm not comfortable powering it because I think it could go horribly wrong. So what that does mean is that when I get it, oh boy, do I get it. I become an expert. Why? Because I was so damn scared to try it that I checked everything. I double, triple checked that. That was NASA level safe. Because I didn't want to hit launch.
I sat in bed for over an hour, about an hour and a half, and researched possums before I actually went and got the possum out of my house.
That's wise. Did you learn anything useful?
Well, the whole point of the research was to help me feel like I could get it out. The people I trusted already told me how to do it. And I actually had I watched a guy get the last one out, I think like a day before.
You wanted to know the possum.
I needed to be sure I wasn't gonna die. I was so scared.
Oh, so you were like psyching yourself up. Like this was a know thy enemy exercise.
It's a conscious adding to what I know to allow myself to accomplish the task I knew I would have to do.
You felt ill-equipped and needed to make an adjustment.
I couldn't jump into anybody's consciousness that I trusted already. I needed more from other people. And then with their expert advice, after soaking that in for an hour and a half.
What you're describing is you had to build it on your own. And that's what that's like when you do it without help.
Yeah, remember, I'm all about accepting all information, but not, I'm all about accepting information. No, Einstein said it's the mark of an educated, no, not Einstein, Aristotle. It's the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain ideas without accepting them. So my whole philosophy is entertain as many thoughts, as many philosophies. I'm an omnist. I believe in all religions. I want to learn all the sciences as much as they're fun and entertaining and blah, blah, blah. So although I had entertained everything about a possum before, I had to really accept it in order to get it out my house. And so I had to look at the information, read the words, all that stuff. And then after an hour and a half, I then spent like another hour like poking it with the stick, making sure it wasn't gonna shit all over my floor.
Poking it with a stick.
Oh, and then I felt like I astral projected into it or like spoke to it. And I actually just put the bucket down and it walked into the bucket.
Oh shit. You were like, this is gonna happen. Don't make it harder on yourself.
But I was too slow and it walked back out.
Like you hypnotized yourself and it.
Oh.
So as soon as you knew what was going on, you were just as hypnotized as the possum. You're like, wait,
man, that was a night, man. I could write a whole sermon about that night. Oh.
So Tony, if you want to be the class guinea pig,
I'd love to. You know this.
I wanted to save a lot of time, so we've got the next 40 minutes. Take a drink here.
And actually, I'll tell you what. Let me leave now to go and get my daughter from school. That way we'll be on my phone and constant without that interruption. I'll just give me 1 minute and I'll say goodbye to my wife. Maybe you can catch Nancy up on, a little bit of what's been going on.
Yeah, I got this lighting issue here since I moved my camera. There we go. That's better. Ooh, don't look directly at those things, man. Those things are hostile to movement. Oh boy. I see it. I still see the lights.
Right. Hey, one time in elementary school band, I looked straight at the stage lights before I had to read my music and I couldn't see shit. I could not. I was sitting there on trumpet guessing. I was guessing. It was.
How'd you do?
Well, I'm amazing. So of course. But actually, when you're in a band, I am the best band member ever because I know where to put what, and I'm confident in what I'm putting where, but I
we
don't
gotta
put
jam
everything
because
everywhere.
that's what I'm trying to learn too. I think we
Like,
jam well together.
Well, the thing is, I'm not a soloist. I am not a solo voice. I don't want to sing a solo. I will when I have to. I'm capable of it. However, put me in a choir and our tenor section will be phenomenal. Like
Okay.
I will blow out of the sanctuary. But a soloist? No, I don't need it. I don't want it. I'm already so
not
much.
Even the solo tenor?
Not even the solo tenor. Like, why?
Would you sing solo that we couldn't hear you?
I'm good at interjections. I can do interjections. Give me. I'm a cheerleader, so if we got a song that needs a little extra, just put your hands in the air.
Hype man. I love a good hype man. So that's the most transferable skill.
All right, I'll give you a second to catch up, Nancy.
All right, so Nancy, we were just talking about today's lecture is cognitive quantum entanglement, and that is the science of connection, like all connection. So the long and short of it is we have found particles in the universe behave in ways where the information seems to travel between them in ways that break the speed of light. They're connected somehow that when you measure one of them and it changes, that information instantly changes. And we've tested this up to 40 miles in the lab. The most recent, so they tested that information out to 40 kilometers, I'm sorry, 40 kilometer distance. They've been able to measure quantum entanglement, instantaneous information transfer. So that's real. And then if you go smaller scale sizes, I think the most recent development was they were able to get 15 trillion atoms to exist in a state of quantum entanglement.
I didn't mean to say that.
So you still can't really build anything with that, but you're getting closer and closer all the time. But that's the thing.
Cereal. The walk.
I'm hearing 2 audio feeds.
Yeah, Tony was accidentally unmuted. I took care of it. He was dealing with very important dad stuff. So we got, that was pretty much the long and short of it, was that these information pairs are linked. And they are linked by vibration and frequency, I would say. If you're looking at wave functions, the way that we've talked about, we talked a lot about wave functions, Nancy. I know it's been a minute. I know you've had some migraines and some other issues, and I'm glad you're feeling better now. But we talked a lot about wave functions and how they interact with each other. Like if you use a slinky and you send little waves, they'll go. And if you send other little waves, they'll go. But if you send one big wave, it goes. And you send another big wave and it goes. But if you send 2 big waves at the same time, they both go. They meet in the middle, they're twice as big. But then they keep going back as the little waves, just like they were before they met each other. So that's what I'm saying is happening when people interact with each other. We are the waves. We are the interactions. We are the highs and the lows of when those 2 things meet each other. And it's only during those interactions that reaction happens. And then you continue on and you become, either an exact copy of yourself, or depending on your ability to understand that interaction as it's happening, you may find parts of it that you learn how to do on your own. Or if you're unfortunate and you encounter something that's very powerful and you don't understand how thoughts work or how ideas happen or how things can spin in on themselves and build these mental prisons, if you never understand that, because when you were young, somebody used all of these things that are very real to actually build a mental prison around you to make it so you couldn't see what was going on. Well, it's kind of hard to be mad at somebody who gets stuck in that position, but it doesn't change the position they're stuck in. And it really doesn't change the way out. And the way out is to recognize that the things that come in and try to change you are not all bad. And just because that one thing really changed you and you didn't want to be changed and you don't know how to get back, doesn't mean that every change after that will have the same result as well. In fact, that's the only way out. That was the way in. The way in is the way out, but you have to walk it in reverse and become the person you were before it happened. And to do that, you have to walk through it, which is done in stages, voluntary confrontation. And some people never finish, because even though there's a physical healing and there's a memory healing, the emotional healing is never addressed. It's just buried or forgotten. And that's not gone. It's still a part of you. It weighs you down. You just learned how to stop paying attention to that part of yourself. And you've said it's okay. You've moved on. But you don't move on the same. You move on as less, because you have to restrict. Because you don't like what happens when it's unrestricted. So that is the way that those things interact amongst themselves. So now, Tony, I see you're back, you're driving. Are you ready to be the guinea pig here? All right, so here's the exercise. So I'm going to be reading a list, and I'm going to be reading this list that I have shared with you. And I'm going to ask you to give me a number between 1 and 10. Or 0 and 10, actually. You can between 0 and 10.
All right.
0 is an option. And then we'll move on as each one of these. So it'll be a range. So there's the rules. There's rules. I'm going to give you a spectrum. Because remember, everything to me is spectrums, and that's the most useful place to get information. Is a comparative spectrum. So thankfully, all of these spectrums have something in common. They have a ratio of 1. All right, there's always the same number of boxes, same scope, different things, same scope, possible maximum to absolute minimum. So that's kind of what I've said before, how 1 + 1 is 3 when you're measuring the number of pieces of information you get. 1, what is the total maximum? 2, what is the total minimum? 3, where am I on that spectrum? That's how you create a measurement when there is none, and it will be stable because you follow.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna change my my perspective here so I can be a little more photogenic while I fill this thing out. All right. So we're gonna start here. I really wish I could see my cursor a little better. Oh, there it is. Google Sheets are not very visible. There we go. All right. So Tony, so if I'm going to walk you through the first one, so you get 10 boxes to spend between this spectrum. And so I'll list, and the first one is an example: afraid and trusting. That's the scale. So if afraid is the opposite of trusting in this specific measurement, that's the playing field that we're talking about. These are the two end zones: fear and trust. The second rule is 10 boxes between them. So if you are a 5 in trusting, you are also a 5 in fear. If you are a 9 in trusting, you are also a 1 in fear. So it's pretty much you're telling me, where do you sit as your favored skill or favored way, or a more self-reflective way of saying it is, where do you sit in terms of your natural bias when you aren't paying attention to who you are? And the way to measure that is not answering the question from the inside of am I or am I not. It is during the moments where I'm not paying attention and this comes up, what types of actions do I choose? Where would I put that person's actions on the spectrum? So it's really an attempt to view your choices rather than your rationalizations when it comes to getting the best measurements for these numbers. But even if there's a bias, it will be consistent throughout, and it's not without value. But that's the advice I give for trying to fill this out as accurately as you can, which is a different way of summing up everything I've said in all of these other lessons. It's all how to be as grounded as possible. All right, so we're going to start afraid to trusting. And you can just, if you want to make it easy, you can pick the one that you identify with more and give it a number. So if you say, well, I'm more trusting, I'm going to say 7. So Or you could say, I don't know, maybe it's 50-50. So pick the one that you just resonate with the most, and I'll do the math on the back end. That'll give us a good flow.
What if they're not opposites? Then it's just which one I want to lean towards, right?
It's you can pick what that means. That's how that scale works. So these are the end posts.
Volcano.
Um,
So it's got a
1
set.
second, Tom.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Good.
We're good.
It's got a set, so we can explode it next week.
Right.
So we'll go at least next week.
Sounds great.
So we'll see.
Yes.
I'll let you know next week. We're gonna go another week. Or we're gonna be done. So, but we'll definitely do next week because we got it.
All right. Sounds like fun. All right. So fear and trusting default. We'll do 2 and 8.
so pick one and tell me one number.
Trusting 8.
Okay, and I'll fill it in using a program. All right, so disgusted and loving.
Oh, I zoomed in on the wrong part. Disgusted and loving. 9 loving.
Angry, peaceful.
Oh, never mind. 7 peaceful.
All right, ashamed, proud.
50-50.
All right, sad, joyful.
9-1.
9 joyful.
9 joyful.
All right, surprised, intrigued.
I'm very rarely surprised, but I don't want to
Okay.
give any zeros. So 1 surprise.
Okay. All right, now we're gonna get more specific. So this was a high dimensional or a low dimensional perspective. All right, this is the least common denominator. So now we're gonna dive into a more specific version of each of those ones we just did. Starting with insecure and secure.
2 insecure.
Anxious and assured.
1 anxious.
Vulnerable and confident.
3 vulnerable. Yes, it is.
All right, whoops. Scared and hopeful.
2 scared.
All right. Averse or affection.
1 averse.
Okay. Apathetic and connected.
2 apathetic.
All right. Repulsed or adoration.
1 repulsed.
Okay. Contempt and caring.
2 contempt.
All right. Frustrated and content.
1 frustrated.
Okay. Annoyed and relaxed.
2 annoyed.
Okay. Envious and tranquil.
4 envious.
Okay. Mad and harmonious.
1 mad.
All right. Awkward, self-confident.
2 awkward.
Low self-esteem and high self-esteem.
1 low self-esteem.
Embarrassed and encouraged.
1 embarrassed.
Humiliated and powerful.
1 humiliated,
depressed, happy,
2 depressed,
pain, ecstatic,
2 pain,
grief, and excitement,
1 grief,
resentment, and thankfulness,
1 resentment,
all right, astonished and engaged,
1 astonished,
distracted and fascinated,
2 distracted,
startled and entranced,
50-50,
all right, overwhelmed and energetic,
1 overwhelmed,
all right, suspicious and certain,
50-50,
all right, apprehensive or convinced,
8 apprehensive,
concerned and positive,
2 concerned,
okay, worried and relieved,
1 worried,
frightened and comforted,
1 comforted. Wait, sorry, opposite. 1 frightened,
gotcha, terrified and safe,
1 terrified,
pessimistic and optimistic.
1 pessimistic,
All right. Oh, by the way, now we're into the third level ones. So these ones are the deepest ones. So we're halfway through. Helpless and capable.
1 helpless.
Hate and compassion.
Not tomorrow, but eventually maybe. 1 hate,
All right. Scorn and tenderness.
1 scorn,
Sickened and reverence.
1 sickened,
Okay. This one actually is a double, but it holds up. Disgust and reverence.
oh, I locked the screen, but it turned it the other way. I thought it would lock it in horizontal. So I can see the words better. All right, we're on
Disgust and reverence.
disgust and reverence. 1 disgust,
Okay. Uninterested and intimate.
50-50,
Bored and engaged.
1 bored,
Reluctance and fondness.
3 reluctance,
What did you say? 3 in reluctance?
3 reluctance,
Okay. Resistance and friendliness.
2 resistance,
Aggravated and satisfied.
1 aggravated,
Upset, comfortable.
1 upset,
Resentful and serene.
1 resentful,
Irritated and calm.
1 irritated,
Jealous and centered.
2 jealous,
Primal aggression and calm.
2 primal aggression,
Enraged and courageous.
1 enraged,
Furious or balanced.
2 furious,
Which, looking at this so far, means I was right in saying you were mapping. I was correct to map you as one of the edges, by the way. So points to Tom for echolocation at a distance. Self-conscious and poised.
50-50.
Uncomfortable and self-assured.
One uncomfortable.
Regretful and fulfilled.
One regret.
Okay. Remorseful and pleased.
One remorseful. Probably got like 2 minutes ago.
Mortified and brave.
One mortified.
Horrified and courageous.
One horrified.
Chagrined and empowered.
One chagrin.
Flustered and effectual.
Effectual.
Effectual, meaning like you are effective. Do you feel like you're effective or you're frustrated?
Two flustered.
Okay. Hopeless and delighted.
One hopeless.
Fatigue, tired, or glad and pleased. Like that's a physical description. Are you normally tired physically, or are you relaxed and happy?
3 fatigue and tired.
Okay, good. I got to clean up the verbiage on that one. Miserable and elated.
Oh, I can't see it. Do that. And Riley may be sleeping.
Miserable and elated.
Where are we at? More chagrined, empowered, flustered.
Miserable and elated.
Miserable, elated. One miserable.
All right. Despair and thrilled.
One despair.
Heartbroken or enthusiastic.
2 heartbroken.
Devastated or passionate.
1 devastated.
Discouraged or appreciation.
1 discouraged.
Disappointed or thankful.
3 disappointed.
Shocked and absorbed.
1 shocked.
Amazed and engrossed.
2 amazed.
Hesitant, curious.
1 hesitant.
Stunned and captivated.
Stressed and mesmerized.
Yeah, stressed and mesmerized. Sorry.
2 stress.
Stunned and captivated.
2 stunned.
Preoccupied and interested.
3 preoccupied.
All right. Confused or animated.
2 confused.
Puzzled and refreshed.
1 puzzled.
All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run upstairs and grab my copy of one of these that I filled out. I'm going to fill it in and show you how the spreadsheet can use this as a personality revealing matrix. Number 1, this is amazingly self-reflective. Whoever does this. Because in many cases, it will be the first time a person has been asked to understand themselves as a percentage of emotion in either direction. So its power to heal by increasing measurement scope is enormous. share this one. This is like real science paper. So this is mine. This is my own filled out copy of this. So I'm gonna put it up on the screen. My data entry is pretty fast, so it shouldn't take very long. There we go. All right. That we can't read it. Stand by. Gotta copy this. This was like a last minute decision for me to include this part in the lecture, so forgive its improvisational tone. I would have filled this out ahead of time if I was planning on it, but I think I can get it done in time to explain it. So 3, 8. There we go.
Tony, can you hear me?
And this I got to take a copy of 1. Wait, looks like I boffed my data entry, sorry. Oh, there it is, there's my last good point. Awkward self-confidence. There we go. Sorry for the dead space. If you guys want to chat amongst yourself, that's fine. It needs probably 2 or 3 solid minutes of.
I just got home and I'm switching back to the laptop, and I made myself a little bit of food in the microwave. How are you doing today, Nancy?
I'm doing well. I have, oh God, I got to go to DMV in a few hours and get a real ID. So I've got a pile of documentation, but yeah, I'm doing well. Reading you're listening to your scores. It's like you are my twin.
It's gonna explain some things, something that I understood, but now I can show you on paper once I finish it. It'll be illuminating.
I felt like a lot of those concepts weren't opposite or didn't apply together, and
yeah, some of them were subjective, some were objective. Maybe it's with my age. I'm in my 70s that I've come a long way. I've learned a whole lot of stuff.
Some of them, don't forget, could be measuring your bias against subjectivity by triggering it.
But like literally nothing phases me anymore. I mean, I can take anything in stride. I can deal with just about anything. I can't think of anything I can't. I've dealt with the absolute worst that could happen and come out on the other side. But Life is good. Really, really good. Maybe because I live alone. Although not by choice. I'm a widow.
I think a lot of the contentment questions or contentment emotions are what I had a lot of the most struggle with because of the subjectivity. Like,
Mhm.
I had to just say, okay, well, what's the default?
How do you act? Yeah, it's not what you feel, it's how you act. That's a tough question.
Mhm.
The hardest one, actually. But a test like this will do other things if it's filled out that way, which is why it's a really good diagnostic tool as well.
Mhm.
This will reveal bias you didn't know you had.
Right.
I'll show you exactly how, because it's easy. Shock and absorb, but I'm almost done here. 3, 5, 6, period. There we go. There we go. All right, so that's all my data. So now I can do some Excel magic where I say that this cell is equal to 10 minus this one. And that always works. And I can take this formula, drag it back here, because this is Excel. That always works. And you know how to do it. This is Google Sheets, to be fair. Do I have to copy the formula? In Excel, you can just drag it. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, I just missed. Apparently, basic mouse work wasn't on my list. There we go. So if I wanted to, so this is the other half of Tony's
Right.
thing filled in. So now I'm going to do the same thing for myself. Equal to 10 minus this number here. Oh, I got to fix the sizing. Do that. So all the bills fill in. 24 font. Bold. Good. There we go. All right, so I drag that formula over here. Missed. All right, so the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to use this third column down here to show differences between us. So there's different kinds of measurements that I can do based on the way that we type to take this measurement. So here's one way that I can do this. I could say is what happens if I subtract Tony's top row from my top row.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to do that, and I'll show you what happens. So equals, that's my equal sign. I'm going to say Tony's top row
Mm-hmm.
minus my top row.
Mm.
So now, then I got to make that bigger here, and I'll do this 2 more times. That 24. Bold. There we go. All right. Go here. Right. All right, so look at this. Yeah, what's all that mean? Why am I getting false? I'm getting falses because some of these, there was a couple of things that I put zeros for. That one is not one of them. What is that, a slashing? That's just a bad data style. Go away. Yeah, so I'm checking my work for mistakes right now. That's the first thing any good scientist does. Okay, that seems to have cleared all that up. So this bottom row, So these are amplitudes, all right? So what I'm saying is, this is where we will agree or disagree
Mm-hmm.
on perspective and where that perspective skews. So if the number is positive, meaning if I take my score from Tony's score and that number is positive, Tony's interaction with me may change his score up or down depending on where I rank. But because I have some of that quality that is comparable to his own, my interaction will not move both of us into next. So we'll both be on the positive side of things. We'll be moving in the same direction, but we won't agree to the same degree. Because what you're saying here is, this is my preferred perspective. So when you talk about the difference between fear and trust, if you haven't measured yourself as opposing units of fear and trust, what you're saying is, I understand all of the value of trust enough to build a complete life, which means you have a lot of great tools for a lot of great jobs. But what you're missing is all of the great tools that are contained with an opposite perspective in the opposite direction that doesn't use your tools or rely on them at all. So it will be a rejection of that, or at least a blindness to it. So this is the first way to use this thing as a self-diagnosis tool. If you have any 9s or 8s, figure out why, at least to the degree that you could hypothetically argue the utility of an equally emphatic reaction at the other spectrum. So if you're a 9 let's go between, what was it? Angry and peaceful, like at the most primal level. If you understand 10 in peace or an 8 in peace, because that's the way to do things and it always gets the jobs done if you do it this way, this way, this way, and it's perfect and there's no need to be mad. Well, everything that being mad can do in the opposite direction of focus is lost, which means the specific situations or the specific duration of that specific application of human emotion and intent is also gone from your list of options. Not because it was never there, but because you didn't know it was there, because the other options were always enough. So pick your poison. No too little, no too much. But so if I'm looking here, I'm just going to highlight this. So the positive numbers are where we agree. The negative numbers are where we will see things differently. Meaning, I don't have enough of your language when I take my score away from you. It dips you negative. It borrows from a well that you can't fill before you sink to my level. So that's a very good way of saying it, is there are certain things that we are so far apart that there isn't enough of you to avoid changing your amplitude. So if all the positive amplitudes are the good ones, all the negative ones are going to be blind spots, which is a big deal because half of all information transmitted by waves, which is very likely what human consciousness is below the line that is positive and negative. It is 1/2. It is the missing part of you, your damn soulmate, the person who does the numbers you can't, but does them well. So here's the thing. First, we're going to look at spots where we agree a lot. So the bigger the number, the bigger the agreement here. So puzzled and refreshed. Yeah, Tony and I, we do not shirk from a mystery. You know, that's invigorating on its own. There is no puzzled. There is only refreshed when that is the comparison. So we strongly agree on that. And how often do we come back to that as one of our core principles? Hey, we're just trying to figure each other out. That's how I understand that. That's how I've understood that.
Should that be on the screen? Like, did you upload anything, or should we be able to see?
So this right here, this top number, I can't highlight, I don't know how to highlight this. So the numbers where the boxes.
Oh, okay, I got them.
That's the appropriate math that adjusts.
I got them. It all went together from what you
Okay.
said.
So here's another one for agreement, and I haven't checked these ahead of time because I didn't know. Remorseful or pleased, that's a 7. Both of us, we don't really do that remorse thing. No, we agree there strongly. So this one's an 8. Bored versus engaged. So that's where we connect a lot because we can understand each other. So these are the things we agree on. Frightened and comforted, that's an 8. In terms of how we feel, how we get there, that's a different story. The negative one, let's do a negative one here. There's not very many because you have such a, so the thing about Tony, and I'm going to explain Tony in a far more clinical terms than his justice of his humanness, right? So describing Tony in this way is the same way as me describing the most complete human I've found when it comes to intensity. So what that means is if I measure people with these fluctuations where I am this much of this, I am this much of that. Tony is more a creature of binary decision than most. By his own admission, he's mostly 9s and 1s, 8s and 1s. I think there's a few 5s in there. Those are your center points. You know what those mean. But also does not have a dissimilar structure than DNA. If you're looking at the sequencing, look at this. 9s and 8s, 9s and 8s, 5, balanced. 9s and 8s, 9s and 8s, 5, balanced. 9s and 8s, 9s and 8s, 5, 5. And then, so he's got these long stretches of 9s and 8s that are punctuated by 5s. So very much like a DNA helix. That's how he's got it figured out. Now, if you look down at mine, I'll go over some of these. And notice, I used a word, I have to go back and retroactively correct the word that I said. I said things that we agreed on. That was not technically the right word. The right word was things we connect on. Is a better, more accurate description. Because now I'm going to show you where those connections come from. And this is where quantum entanglement becomes real. When it turns to 2 people. So I'm going to go over to the red section here. And I'm going to show my stuff. 7. So this is when I am being myself. And I am outside myself watching. And saying, what kind of person is that man acting like? What kind of things is he paying attention to? And because I can do this, because I can practice, what kind of thoughts are running through his head? Does he have the thoughts of a happy man? Does he have the thoughts of a paranoid man? Does he have the thoughts of a scared man or a frightened man, et cetera, et cetera? So I've asked these questions and say, what person's thoughts would look like this to me? And is that me? Because if I decide what it means, and I can recognize it and I'm honest about both things, well, that's all you need to be able to understand that it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be consistent all the way through. And there has to be a part of it that lets you be bad and evil and deficient. And as long as that exists and it's the same size as the parts of you that can be good, use whatever damn scale you want. It's optional. It just has to be consistent. So that's why this scale is so useful. So this red category, my natural state for receiving new information and living life is a 7 in aggravation, 7 in upset. However, that's balanced by a 7 in serene. That's indifference though. That's just, I threw away the ability to be resentful because I needed something to balance everything else. And my lack of resentment actually gave me bad calibration information. So it kept me sane, but it made me unable to understand one of the patterns that created my own private hell. So once you can figure out how all of these things could be facing in the same direction, and how to do that at the same time, then you can work on moving the needle, but you really need to find out where you are before that happens, or things like this will be the result when you measure yourself. 7, irritated. 3, in primal aggression. That's because I was a coward. Cowards have a hard time being aggressive. Enraged and courageous. Oh no, yeah, 7 in aggression, and what was it? 7 in jealous. I got lost here. I'm sorry. Lost my own thing. It doesn't matter either way. You get the point. Is that there's a lot of 7s and 8s on the bottom of my red section. 8 in furious, 2 in balance. I always act like I'm mad. And rather than learn why that was happening, I just learned how to carve up little parts of it and turn it into fuel for things, because it's a really good fuel. But it doesn't work if you don't know how it works and where it comes from, because mining it inefficiently damages the self. Because anger is a very difficult thing to handle without it corrupting you and unstabilizing your wave function. It needs a specific frequency. You have to plan it. You have to direct it. You have to bind it. Otherwise, it becomes an unstable wave that throws you off, which is exactly what happens when people get angry. They lose coherence. They literally can't get their shit together. And they've proven this. Your cognitive function goes down when you're angry. Your wave coherence is unbalanced when you are angry to that level. You are losing yourself to a part of yourself that is stronger, independent, but interacting with you in this moment in a way that you can't control because you don't understand where it comes from. Because that specific response is the right tool for the job that you're having. You know that. But you're using it so poorly that it never ends well. That's the lesson to be found in this kind of stuff. So if I'm looking up here, Tony has a 1 in aggravated and a 9 in satisfied. And I have a 7 in aggravated and a 3 in satisfied. So what that means is I can understand up to 7 levels of Tony being satisfied if he can explain it to me in terms that I understand. If he can tolerate stretching his wave function 7 boxes in the other, 14 boxes in the other direction. So because Tony is so far from where I am, how far can I stretch? How far can he stretch? And how much of my stretching can he uses before he is unable to not let go? Because it's too far, too foreign, too much. These things are mapped in stages. They're intensities. So so guess what? What do Tony and I talk about all the time? Fear, being centered, and being mad. And we go back and forth on this. And guess what? We arrive at similar conclusions. But the way that we get there is wildly different. And now both of us have a map that extends in the opposite direction of amplitude, which mirrors our own because that is how waves function. A wavelength is 1 part above and 1 part below. It is not a wavelength until both sides are included. So that is why, that's where the power comes from. When you connect with somebody and your ego is your resonance, like a tuning fork. If you know anything about tuning forks, if you go into a room full of tuning forks and you hit one of them and you move it around the room, other tuning forks will vibrate as well. And the bigger the tuning fork, the greater the vibration that will happen just in the presence of this thing. That is why big egos move people. They're engulfed by comparison.
If I'm awake, I'll try to rewatch this with Duncan, either tonight or tomorrow night, hopefully. Did you want to give a wrap up before?
Yeah, oh shit, I went way over because I was so interested, I lost time, which rarely happens to me. So I don't even feel bad because that was a treat to experience
You're welcome.
that personal nirvana for however many minutes it was.
I'm getting closer to giving you your oh so special gift.
Excellent. Yeah, let's wrap it up. The short of it is fill the thing out. If you have a partner, that's the relationship advice I really want to close with. If you have a partner and both of you are willing to figure this out, like my wife and I, here's what you will find, okay? Add your numbers up for you and your wife. We're not going to use the scale that Tony and I did. That's not the right scale for couples who are trying to understand each other. The right scale for couples is, this is a competence grid. It is for self-aware decision-making that both of you can agree on the reasoning behind. So assume, for this example, that wife A has a 9 in trust and husband B has a 9 in fear. That means that husband A gets to be in charge when trust is the primary issue, with only one box of certainty, 10% of the time, when it comes to the successful mapping of trust. If my wife says I am getting trust wrong, she is right. However, if I am telling my wife, now is the time to be afraid and here is why, I am right. That is how it works. And the more overlapping boxes you have, hooray for you for connecting as a couple. Bad for you because you have blind spots that are shared. You will, say if both of you are peaceful, comfortable, and serene, you will lose 100% of the opposite wavelength when it comes to the wisdom of all of the anger, aggression, frustration, etc. And both of you will still feel like half of a person on some level, which guess what is why cheating and polygamy and multiple promiscuity is the thing people seek, is they're looking for the full package and they're not measuring their partners to the degree that would satisfy that forever, because that is a small window. So they just chop it up and add it together over time. Fair enough. Who am I to say one is better than the other if both get the job done and it's legal in your state and everyone's a consenting adult? I have things to say about what happens to people younger than certain age once money gets involved in that interaction. That is a big problem. But as far as consenting adults go, have at you, do it up. So that's the wrap up on that. That's how you find out if you're in a couple who should be in charge of what. Both of you need to be able to have the metaphorical balls to be honest about what circumstance you're living in. Like if your partner said, if you're having a fight about trust and you know where you land on trust and they have agreed that they land differently, you trust the fucking boxes. And that is your marriage contract at that point, for good or bad, because they might not be you, but if you agree on the situation, they are the best you've got. And you couldn't have done better by your own admission. So when it comes time to test that, test it before, not after. That's the point. But measure it first so you know in the moment. So that's the closing advice for couples. But do either of you have anything to weigh in on this topic of quantum cognitive entanglement and what connects us? So what connects us is things that are different from us that work. That's the simplest. If you're a 9 in one thing and you see somebody who is a 9 in the opposite and their life is not fucked up, you're either going to try and destroy them, which is the same way as saying, can I destabilize them? Are they weaker than me? Or how the fuck are they doing that? Because I'm smart enough to know that they're stable. Yeah, so and that was the lesson. So questions?
I don't have a question, but I just want to give you an observation. And of course, I'm a widow, but we were so perfectly compatible. Not that we always agreed, And he described it sometimes as, you know, when one is up and one is down, then it's the opposite, and then you're together. And our differences not only brought spice, but it brought being open to the other's differences. And I got to say, it can always be worked out, always, if you're willing.
Yeah, you find the common ground.
And sometimes it's not exactly common ground, but it's like agree to disagree on some things.
Well, sometimes you leave the damn country you were trying to cross through and you make a different one. Like you don't even measure success the same way. You change the rules of the game, the path. There's so many ways to skin a cat. Like usually the problem isn't the thing, it's what's right in front of us. So if we can fix what's right in front of us and still get the thing, and it takes 2 extra steps, that's better than not having the thing. If your only choice isn't a straight line.
All right, guys, I'm out. I'll see you guys in the dojo.
Again, too.
All right, Tony.
Thanks for watching.
Yeah.
So here we are. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good.
Good. I am too. I am doing really well. I am feeling really well. I have periods when I don't. I mean physically, not mentally. Oh, hi.
Yeah, I'm just getting my desktop cleaned up here.
Let's see. I'm seeing you from the side. That throws me off. There you go.
I got so many monitors here. I can't look at all of them at the same time.
Yeah.
I was so proud of this little spreadsheet here. What an eye opener, game changer. it
Yeah,
was.
that was really in depth, for lack of a better word, but in depth.
So I can show you on the camera just the small example my wife filled in. So this was hers. We did 1 box for her, but we're coming back to it. She had something else to do. But here's how that turned into the competence thing. So when
It's upside down.
okay, you'll have to use your imagination.
Okay.
So that says irritated and calm.
Uh-huh.
You can hold the camera long enough for it to focus. You'll see here on the bottom, when it comes to being irritated, we have 2 shared boxes. So both of us can be useful and irritated when it's a 20% irritation situation. But when irritation is useful for getting things done the right way, I've got these extra boxes here all the way up to 7. So that means as a couple, so long as we're on the same page, our total potential for irritation in a productive and competent way is 7. And you go up here to calm. We have 3 shared boxes of calm, which means both of us are equally capable of making the right use of calm in a 3 calm intensity situation. But my wife, she goes all the way up to 8.
Wow.
So when the answer is to be calm, and she's sure that's the right answer, in this one instance, she's the boss. And it might be that I see a calm situation or an irritating situation, but that's got to be handled more in the moment, where you gotta know enough about being calm and irritated to know when it's warranted,
Right.
when it's an overreaction, and that's the kind of clarity that is decided as a couple. Like, is this really a calm thing, or can we do this? What's the best way?
I tend to, well, maybe it's a female, but I would be more fly off the handle than Andrew ever was, and he could reel me back in easily because of who he was. And
I just
but you
started
gotta
calling
be
my
willing
wife
to
a little
listen.
monster, and I told her I loved her anyways, and she can't make me angry because she's too cute when she's mad.
Oh, we don't like to hear that. Come on.
That pretty much destroyed her ability to get mad at me instead of trying to work things out. So I was glad to get rid of that.
we always work things out. As supposed to my first marriage, I mean, he just hit me and okay, dear, and he got his way. Oh, I've been talking with is her name Kathy?